Welcome to this YSL Microsoft Excel tutorial. In this part of the series, we're going to cover the logical functions AND, OR, and NOT. So we'll start with a quick recap of basic logical tests, and then look at how to combine multiple logical tests using both the AND function and the OR function. We'll cover a few examples, making conditions using numbers, text, and date values. We'll look at how we can find numbers and dates which fall between two values, and at the end of the video show a couple of examples of using the NOT function to reverse a false into a true and vice versa. So let's get started. To get started, I've created a basic list of the top 50 highest grossing movies. As usual, if you want to follow along with the video, I'll drop a link in the description below so you can download the same data and follow along with me if you'd like to. So this video is all about using the AND, OR, and NOT logical functions, and you're most likely to encounter these functions in combination with an if function. So just to start the video, let's have a quick recap of a basic if. I want to provide a description for my films to call them either a hit or a miss, based initially just on financial success. So we're going to be looking at the values in column G, and if the film has made at least $1 billion of profit, then it's a hit. Otherwise, it's not sufficiently financially successful, so we'll call it a miss. So to make that work, we can use a basic if function. So in cell L2, I'm going to say equals if, and then in some round brackets, write our first basic logical test. Now, we've covered logical tests in quite a lot of detail in previous videos, but just as a very quick little recap, here's an example of a simple one. You've got two values to compare and some kind of conditional operator to put between the two. So in this case, we're going to go for a greater than or equal to. So back in this cell, we're going to say if, and then refer to cell G2. I'm going to check if that's greater than or equal to 1,000. So of course, we're talking about millions of dollars here, so 1,000 million is the equivalent of $1 billion. And if that's true, I'd like to provide the description hit. Otherwise, I'd like to provide the description miss. So I can close the round brackets at that point, hit enter, and then fill that formula down that column and see which films are hits and which are misses. So that first example was fairly straightforward. We've seen many examples of those basic if functions in previous videos. So let's make things a little bit more complicated. I've now decided that my success of my films should be judged not just on its financial performance, but also on its critical performance. So now I only want a film to be described as a hit if its profit is at least $1 billion, and if its Oscar wins is at least 1. Now, in order to make that one work, we've got to combine two logical tests in the same if function. So we've already seen how to write a single logical test, just like the one we've done there, G2 is greater than or equal to 1,000. Now I've got to write two logical tests in the same argument. I can't just do that by writing a comma-separated list of conditions. What I need to do is use a logical function to combine my tests. There are several logical functions available. We're going to look at 3 in this video, the 3 most common ones, the AND, OR, and NOT functions. So both the AND and the OR function allow you to write multiple logical tests, up to 255 of them, but don't worry, we're not going to get anywhere near that number in this video. The AND function returns true when every single one of its logical tests returns true. The OR function returns true when any single one of its logical tests returns true. The NOT function is a little different. It can only accept a single logical test in the first place, and it returns true when its logical test returns false, and vice versa. So basically it's a way to flip a true into a false and a false into a true. We'll see that a bit later on in the video. For this example, it's hopefully obvious that we need to use the AND function. The film can only be a hit if it's both financially and critically successful. So to put that into practice, if I have a quick look at the if function page again, we're going to be using two logical tests combined in an AND function in this single parameter of the if function. So AND G2 is greater than or equal to 1,000, comma, I2 is greater than 0. So let's do that in reality. Let's head back to the first worksheet. Let's edit the formula there in cell L2. And let's just zoom in so it's a little easier to see. And what we're going to do is wrap an AND function around our initial logical test. So if I open up some round brackets, we can see we've got logical 1 and then up to 4 additional optional parameters with the tantalizing ellipses there, so indicating that there are more parameters to fill in if you need them. After g2 greater than or equal to 1000, I'm going to type in a comma and then say I2 is greater than 0. And then I can close the round brackets to wrap up my AND function. So the first film should still be considered a hit in this list because this film, Avatar, is making a profit of at least $1 billion and has at least one Oscar win. If I fill that formula downwards, however, we'll see that some of our films that were previously hits no longer are because they haven't won any Oscars. Just so that we can see a quick example of using the OR function, let's make an alternative version of this hit and miss column. I'm going to copy that column header across into column M and then change its name so it's hit or miss. The idea behind this one is that the film can be successful if it's either financially or critically successful. So to make that one work, we're going to say equals if, I'll attempt to spell that correctly, there we go. And then we're going to use the OR function to combine our logical tests this time. They're going to be the same two logical tests. I'm going to check if G2 is greater than or equal to 1000, followed by a comma, and then I2 is greater than 0. If either of those two things are true, then the film is a hit. Otherwise, the film is a miss. So having done that, I can fill that formula downwards, and we should see alternative results this time. So just scrolling backwards so we can see the two relevant columns, G and I. So all these films at the top of the list are hits because, well, at this point, their profit is greater than or equal to 1000. So we don't even need to evaluate the second condition in this particular case. Let's scroll down a bit further and find some films that haven't made $1 billion of profit. There's the first one there. So it's neither made $1 billion of profit nor has it received an Oscar win. So that's definitely a miss. Likewise for these ones and these ones, but eventually we'll get down to a film that's made less than $1 billion of profit, but has at least one Oscar win. So that one's considered a hit. So there's the basic difference between the AND the OR functions for combining logical tests. You can use the and OR functions to combine logical tests involving any data type. So far we've worked with a couple of columns of numeric values in columns G and I. Let's have an example working with text. I'd like to provide a description of my films based on their certificate, and I'm going to check if it's either the PG certificate or the U certificate, then the film is suitable for young children. So let's create a new column in column N. I'm going to call this one age rating or age band or something like that. And I'm going to check equals if, and then use the OR function, because if either condition is true, I want to provide the same answer. So I'm going to look at cell J2 and I'm going to check if it's equal to U. And of course, because it's text, I need to wrap that up in some double quotes. Then a comma, and then J2 equals, and then in some double quotes, PG. I can then close the round brackets for the OR function, follow that with a comma, and if that's true, say young children. Just for the moment, I'm going to not provide an answer for the other certificates. So I want to show essentially an empty cell. If I just omit the third parameter there, just close the round brackets, I'd see the value false appearing. So I'm going to type in a comma and then just type in two double quotes with nothing in between, creating an empty string. So that will look like a blank cell. So once I've entered that, I'll see that I don't get anything in that first cell because it's in the 12A rating. If I double click to fill that one down, there we go, we can see young children where it's either PG or U. We can also use the and OR functions within nested if functions or the ifs function if you prefer. So I'd like to check if the certificate is 12A or 15, then that's suitable for older children. Then for anything else, it would be suitable for adults only. So let's head back to the formula in cell N2, and I'm going to edit that. I'm going to take away the double quotes there to replace the empty string. And if we're going to do this with a nested if function, I need to open up another if function at this point. Then inside there, I need to open up another OR function because I have two more conditions to test. I want to check if J2 equals 12a, followed by a comma, or J2 equals 15. Attempt to spell 15 correctly. There we go. Okay, so that's the OR function. I need to close a set of round brackets for that. If that happens to be true, then I want to provide the phrase older children. One more comma, and if that's not true, then the certificate must be 18 or worse, so it must be suitable for adults only. So let's enter that as our description. And then I've got to close one additional set of round brackets for my extra if function. Let's just try and scroll across to see all of that on one single line. So there we go. So if either of these first two conditions are true, we get young children. If either of the second conditions are true, we get older children. Otherwise, we get adults only. So I can enter that and then fill that formula down the column and see a description for, I think we'll probably only see two. I don't think we have any 18 rated movies in this list, so just older children or younger children. The AND function is particularly helpful when working with numbers and dates to find out if a value falls between two values. So for this example, let's say we want to find out if the film's runtime is around about the optimal runtime of about 120 minutes. So I'd like to check if the runtime of a film is between 110 and 130 minutes. If so, it's optimal. Otherwise, it's either too short or too long. I don't care which. So to do that, let's have a new column over at the right-hand side. Let's call this one something like runtime range. And we'll create a formula that says equals if, and then use the AND function to check the value of the runtime minutes. So runtime minutes is in column D, so we'll look at cell D2, and we'll say, first of all, D2 is greater than or equal to 110, followed by a comma, and then D2 less than or equal to 130. So if both those conditions are met, it means that our runtime falls between those two extremes. We can then type in a comma, and then if that's true, we'll say optimal, and then if not, we'll say either too short or long. Okay, so we can close the round brackets at that point and enter that formula, and then we can fill that formula downwards and find out which films have an optimal runtime. So there we go. We can use a similar technique to find out if a date falls between two values. So for this example, let's find out if the film was released in the last year before COVID lockdowns had a drastic effect on the cinema industry. I want to find out if the film was released between the 1st of January 2019 and the 31st of December 2019. So to do that, the same basic pattern that we've just used for the runtime range, let's create a column that says something like a pre-COVID movie or something along those lines. And we'll use the if function again, of course, so equals if. And then in the we want to find out if a date falls between two dates, so we're going to use the AND function again. So we need to check if the value of cell C2, which is where the release date is stored, is both greater than or equal to, and then I need to enter a date representing the 1st of January 2019. So the best, most reliable way to enter a date into a formula in Excel is to use the date function. So I can use the date function, open up some round brackets and say 2019, comma 1, comma 1 for the month and the day. Close the round brackets, followed by a comma, and then enter my second logical test, which checks if C2 is less than or equal to the next date, which is 2019, comma 12, comma 31. I can then close the round brackets for the date function and close the round brackets for the AND function. And then if both those conditions are met, I'm going to call this one pre-COVID film. Otherwise, what do I want to see? Well, let's say nothing, actually. I'm going to use an empty string as the result for this one. So just two double quotes with nothing in between. So that's the final formula, looking something like this. And once we've entered that, we can see if the film was released in the year immediately prior to the year that COVID lockdowns had an effect. So the final one of the three logical functions to look at in this video is the not function, and that behaves a little differently to the two functions we've already seen. As you can see, the main difference is that the not function accepts only a single logical test, and what it does is when the logical test returns true, the not function returns false, and vice versa. You don't often need the not function because you can almost always rewrite your logical statements in such a way that you can avoid it. But sometimes not is helpful. It can help you write a slightly shorter bit of logic or think about your logic in a way that's clearer to you. So just a couple of quick examples. Let's head back to the top 50 box office. And I want to write an expression that tells me whether I should watch or avoid watching a film. So we're going to base that based on the genre column. So I'm going to create a new column in column Q that's watch or avoid. And basically I'm interested in whether the film is a romance film or not. If it's a romance film, I want to avoid it. So just to write the absolute basic logic to check if the genre equals romance. If I write the basic logical test in cell Q2 to say equals, K2 equals romance. Now, as we've seen from previous videos, when you're testing strings like this, it's not case sensitive. So if I say K2 equals romance, it says false for science fiction. If I double click to fill that formula downwards, the one single romance film in the list returns true. Now, I'm thinking about this logic in a positive fashion. I want this to tell me whether I should watch it or not. And at the moment, I've kind of got the reverse of that. It's saying false when I do want to watch a film. So what I could do is just wrap a not function around this to flip the true into a false and vice versa. So if I say not K2 equals romance, close the round brackets at the end, fill the formula downwards, now I'm seeing a more positive answer. It's saying true when I can watch the film because it's not a romance film, and false when I shouldn't watch it. Oh, of course, that's not the only way I could have produced that result. I could have written my logic in the opposite way. I could have said K2 not equal to romance, in which case I wouldn't have needed the not function at all. But the not function, as I say, can help you to write your logic in a way that makes more sense to you. You may also find the not function helpful to reverse the logical value returned by other functions. So in a previous video, we had a look at how we could establish whether a film name contains a particular word. I think we looked at the word Star Wars. So let's replicate that example. I want to check whether a film title has got the phrase Star Wars anywhere within it. To do that, we can use either the find or the search functions. Find is case sensitive and search isn't. So in this case, I'm going to use the search function. So let's call this one, I think we call it do or do not in the previous example. So let's say equals search, and then the text I'm looking for is the phrase Star Wars, and I'm looking for that within cell B2, and then I'm going to fill that formula downwards. Now this doesn't produce a very nice looking result initially. If the phrase Star Wars isn't included in the film title, I get a hash value error. When the phrase Star Wars is included in the film title, it tells me the position at which the phrase Star Wars begins. So in most cases, Star Wars is the first word in the title. It occupies the first character. This one film here, which is Rogue One, Star Wars begins at character position number 14. Now, the position isn't really that important to me. All I care about is whether or not the phrase Star Wars exists. And to convert that into something meaningful and logical, I could use a function which tells me whether this is an error or not. So I'm going to head back to cell R2. Convenient. Wow, serendipity there for the Star Wars example. And then I'm going to use the isError function. I'm going to wrap that around the search there. So isError, search Star Wars in cell B2. Then we can close the round brackets and hit enter, and I'll get the value true when it doesn't contain Star Wars and false when it does. So once again, I've got kind of my logic working the wrong way round. I'd like to convert the positive into a negative and vice versa. So I'm going to go back to that cell R2 again and wrap the not function around the isError function. I'll just need to close an extra set of round brackets at the end. So at this point, when I fill the formula downwards, I get the value true when it is a Star Wars film and false when it's not, which is a more natural way, I think, to read that sort of result. Of course, the final result then would be inserting that logical test inside an if function to produce, rather than the value true or false, some sort of other description. So just to wrap this up, let's add an if function. So if not isError search Star Wars, which basically means if the film name contains the word Star Wars, then it's a do. Otherwise, it's a do not. Close the round brackets at the end, fill the formula downwards, and there we go. So there's a reasonably nice overview of the three common logical functions, and, or, and not. Hope you found that one useful. Thanks very much for watching as always, and we'll see you next time.